Welcome to AP European History Review.
Today we are covering a lesson called Rivals on the World Stage.
All right, so let's do a little bit of background reminder and review before going into this lesson. Let's talk about some key terms. So, Renaissance, we know it means rebirth. It's going to have opened up people's minds to new things like exploring and learning new information. We also have this thing called the Protestant Reformation, which I know we haven't talked about yet, but we really will deep dive soon. But it's pretty much happening in the 1500s, and it's going to fracture the church because people are going to be leaving the Catholic Church and kind of creating this thing called Protestantism. But either way, both Catholicism and Protestantism are going to want to get more converts to their religion. So that, again, get a little bit more of an influence there, a little bit more of that God from the three Gs. Then we have the population growth. So lots of population growth is going to happen because the Black Death is no longer a thing, right? A ton of people aren't dying anymore. So population increases. And a lot of people want new starts. They've kind of been burned by the Black Plague. We also have new monarchies because having a central government and taking power away from the nobles is expensive. So these central governments need money. And colonies are going to be a great way to make money. Again, we got the other two G's from the three G's here of glory and gold. And then lastly, mercantilism, going back to the G's. It's an economic system that spans a couple hundred years. It's the idea that there's a fixed or a finite amount of wealth in the world, and once that's been discovered, there's no more to find. So countries and those centralized governments are going to want to be the first to go find that land and conquer it.
So, the first countries that we're going to talk about with related to exploration and these rivals with how they're exploring are these countries we're calling the Iberian nations. Now, the Iberian nations are in the Iberian Peninsula, which is what you see pictured on this map. It is Spain and Portugal, and they're going to dominate exploration for a very long time. So these countries, Spain and Portugal, had a lot of Muslims in their country, which actually had a lot of these people had a lot of experience navigating through the desert using the stars, which is very similar to how to navigate on the ocean. Portugal is also forced to trade by the sea because, as you see, their location is a lot of their coastline is on the sea, right? So they're kind of forced into a lot of trading. An important figure to know is Prince Henry the Navigator, who's alive in the early 1400s. And he's a Portuguese explorer. And one of his goals is to try to find a sea route to China because that's where a lot of the trade is happening. So to do this, he sails around the west coast of Africa, sailing south down the coast to try to get to China that way. And he also sets up a school to train explorers. And in this school is where we get a lot of new inventions that help exploring, which we talked about last lesson, like the astrolabe and the stern post rudder. And actually, interesting to note, one of the people that learned in Prince Henry the Navigator's School of Exploration is Christopher Columbus, who we're all familiar with, alive in the mid to late 1400s. He is an Italian explorer. However, even though he's Italian, Spain is going to have a role in Christopher Columbus. Spain sees that Portugal is making money off of this new sea route to China. And so Spain wants to take a risk on this new explorer named Christopher Columbus, who went to Prince Henry the Navigator's school. So Columbus has this idea that we can get to Asia by going west. Just so we know, like, no, I know there's an old story like the world was flat. No one really thought that, but Columbus thinks if we go west, we can sail around the world and get to Asia that way. But as the story goes, and as you know, in 1492, Columbus sails the ocean blue, right? In October of 1492, Columbus ends up landing in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean of Central America, and he calls the people there Indians, all right? And so this is one of our beginning of our, as we're exploring the New World. And as they get to the New World, they have to kind of decide who gets to control the New World. And remember, Spain and Portugal are the ones dominating this. So we get something called the Treaty of Tordesillas, which is in 1494. There's, again, the debate, Spain, Portugal, who has access to this New World? We're talking mainly Central and South America. Both countries had thought that Columbus had discovered Asia, so they were a little mistaken at the time. Okay, and just so a little background story for you on this, Portugal ends up bribing the Pope, is Pope Alexander VI, and they convinced the Pope to give all the lands in the east to Portugal and all the lands in the west to Spain. Portugal thinks it's winning this treaty, but as we'll see in the map, because this isn't Asia, Spain ends up getting most of North and South America through this treaty. And I'll show you on a map in the next slide so it makes sense. So Spain is going to dominate from this, and it's going to create the Spanish Empire. And there's a couple of important people to know from the Spanish Empire. We talked about these two already, Ferdinand and Isabella. They got very rich from the Treaty of Tordesillas, and they realized they knew that they were making money, but they didn't realize kind of the extent to how much money they were going to make from their colonies. And then we have this other individual named Charles V. He was actually the grandson of Ferdinand and Isabella. It's a little bit confusing, but he was the leader of the Holy Roman Empire, which is like in Eastern Europe. But he also, because he was their grandson, inherits the Spanish throne at 19. So he's super powerful guy, right? He has the Holy Roman Empire. He has the Spanish throne. He has all this money, okay? And just so you know a little bit about his story, Charles V actually takes out a loan from this family in Germany called the Fugger family, which is a lot like the Medicis, right? They're a banking family. And this is how he gets his title as leader of the Holy Roman Empire. But as soon as Charles V discovers, and Spain discovers gold in the New World with the Aztecs and the Mayans, Fugger family starts to say, hey, like, we want you to pay back those loans that we gave you so that you could take over the Holy Roman Empire. And the reason I'm telling you the story is because it's a little bit of a side story, but I want you to see that it's an example of how the wealth of the New World is changing everywhere, right? We have this Fugger family who is not a noble family. They're not royalty, but they're playing kingmaker, right? They're deciding who's king in Europe. And so this is an example of how the middle class gets risen up by all this exploration. All right, and then the last group I want to talk to you about is the Portuguese Empire. Their main focus is on the African coast and then in parts of South America and parts of Asia. And they want to get gold and they want to find a way around Africa to get to Asia. All right, so on our next slide, what we're going to see is this is a map of the Treaty of Tordesillas. So if you see that gray line through South America, this is the line that they had set in 1494. And remember, everything to the east was supposed to be Portuguese, and everything to the west was supposed to be Spanish. They didn't realize at the time how much of the New World, how much money Spain was going to make off of this. This is an important treaty and line to know.
All right, so let's talk about some effects of that exploration that Mr. Johnson just went over. So let's start with economic success. Economies are going to move from Mediterranean focus to Atlantic focus because now we have the New World, right? It shifts the focus to the New World. It took decades to discover that Columbus had discovered a new continent because remember, they thought they had discovered a different way to Asia. At the beginning, Spain and Portugal are going to dominate colonization, but eventually, after England, France, and the Netherlands start to see all this wealth and stuff coming in, they begin to colonize North America as well. So all of these countries, right, these empires are getting richer, while the colonies are not. And then we have the second bullet of resource-rich colonies. So Spain is going to find a ton of silver and gold. Like Mr. Johnson has reiterated, Spain makes a lot of money. Other natural resources help European empires make money too. We have things like sugar, cotton, fur, timber, even maple syrup, these new goods. Then we have commercial revolution and the price revolution. So this is more economic success introduction to new ways of life, right? New products and new ways that come about because we have the new world, and new ideas, new goods. Colonization, new wealth, and added population are going to help create more banking and shipping and arms, right? Technology, agricultural, and pirating industries, and monarchies start to get competitive. More on this in future lessons. And then we have the Columbian Exchange. Again, we're going to go into this deeper in a future lesson, but it's going to make the population of Europe grow. It's going to give European countries access to new goods and cash crops and new colonies. Spain is going to become the leading country that initially starts this Columbian Exchange trading. Eventually, more European countries get involved. You'll see a lot of similarities in effects here.
So to get through how other countries progressed with colonies, I wanted to bring up a few other examples. In the late 1500s, late 1600s, after Spain and Portugal, had taken their lead, France, England, and the Netherlands start to colonize a lot of North America. So let's start with France. So France in the beginning does not have a lot of interest in expansion, but eventually French explorers start to map out the St. Lawrence River, which is up in Canada. They're mapping out Lake Michigan and the Mississippi River. And what is the French main goal is actually to get fur and to trade. So it's like an economic goal. So they're trying to get fur from the natives, trade with the natives, bring it back to the home country. England's another country that follows. They follow behind France. They map a lot of North America's east coast. They compete with the Spanish Empire in some areas, like in Florida. and they established something called the British East India Company to trade. They're trying to take the goods from the colonies, trade with India. They're trying to this is a company that tries to trade all over the world. And we'll see this company name brought up more often again. And then finally, we have the Netherlands. They're also interested in trade and money. They formed the Dutch East India Company, okay? And they want to increase trade. They compete with the British East India Company and Spain and all these other companies, and they start to compete on a global scale. And this really helps bring about the Dutch Golden Age. It really helps bring about the Netherlands as a strong power. They don't have a ton of like land colonies, but they have like kind of like a lot of small areas around the world. So this is the historical developments for this lesson. These are the things, again, that College Board wants you to know. But big idea is how we have Spain and Portugal competing for colonies. We have the effects of all the exploration, and then we see how the rest of Europe tries to get involved.
Thank you for watching. Bye.